The arrival and the query. The airship's descent was a symphony of creaking metal and hissing steam, its silhouette blotting out the waning sun as it anchored above the city's edge. A hush fell over the marketplace below, merchants and customers alike pausing to watch the enormous vessel settle into place. Beneath its shadow, the streets of Dalvener seemed to hold their breath. Ellesmere tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, though the blade remained sheathed. His post at the city gate rarely brought excitement beyond drunken brawls or disputes over tolls, but the arrival of an Imperium airship promised something more dangerous than mere disorder. The sigil emblazoned on its hull, a crimson phoenix wreathed in flames, marked it as a vessel of the Imperial Inquisition. "Think they've come for taxes?" muttered Tovin, the younger of the two guards stationed beside him. Tovin's hand trembled slightly as it hovered over his spear, betraying his poorly masked nerves. Ellis didn't answer immediately. He watched as the gangplank lowered, a hiss of steam preceding the procession that followed. The first figure to emerge was a woman clad in black armor trimmed with silver, her helm under one arm. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe braid, and her piercing gray eyes scanned the gathering crowd with cold precision. Behind her trailed a contingent of 10 soldiers, their movements disciplined and synchronized, each bearing the same crimson sigil on their breastplates. "That's no tax collector," Ellis murmured at last. His voice was low, almost reverent, though his expression was anything but. "That's an inquisitor." The woman strode forward, her boots striking the cobblestones with measured authority. She stopped just short of the gate, her gaze locking onto Ellis as if she had already assessed and dismissed every other soul in the vicinity. "You're the captain here?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut. Ellis straightened, though he didn't rise to her assumption of rank. "Just a guard, ma'am. Captain's away on patrol." Her lips pressed into a thin line, as if the absence of higher authority was a personal affront. "I am Inquisitor Lysara Vane," she said, her voice carrying an edge that suggested she was accustomed to obedience. "By order of the Emperor, I require access to the city archives." "You will take me there." Ellis hesitated. The archives were hardly a restricted area, but the Inquisition's interest in them was unsettling. "The archives, ma'am? Forgive me, but might I ask why?" Her eyes narrowed. "You might not." Behind her, one of the soldiers shifted his weight, the subtle movement a reminder of the power she wielded. Ellis weighed his options and found them lacking. He nodded. "This way, then." As he led the group through the city's winding streets, Ellis couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to him like a second shadow. The Inquisition didn't travel without cause, and whatever their purpose, it rarely boded well for those involved. The archives were housed in an old stone building at the heart of Dalvener, its weathered facade a testament to centuries of storms and sun. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and dust. Rows of shelves stretched into the dimly lit distance, each laden with the records of generations past. Inquisitor Vane wasted no time. She gestured to her soldiers, who fanned out in practice formation, their boots echoing against the stone floor. She turned to Ellis. "Leave us?" Ellis hesitated, his sense of duty clashing with his survival instinct. "Ma'am, if there's anything specific—" "Leave," she repeated, her tone brooking no argument. He stepped back, retreating to the doorway, but lingering just out of sight. Curiosity gnawed at him. What could the Inquisition want with old city records? From his vantage point, he could hear the rustle of pages as Vane and her soldiers searched the shelves. "Here," one of the soldiers said, his voice low but clear. Ellis leaned closer, straining to catch the exchange. Vane's response was terse. "Burn it." Ellis's breath caught. Burn it? What could be so dangerous that the Inquisition would erase it entirely? He knew he should walk away, pretend he hadn't heard, but his feet remained rooted to the ground. "Are you going to linger there all night? Or will you come out and explain yourself?" Vane's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Ellis froze, his hand instinctively moving to his sword. When he stepped into the room, her expression was unreadable, but her soldiers were already closing in. "Curiosity is a dangerous habit," she said, her voice as calm as it was menacing. Ellis met her gaze, forcing himself to stand tall despite the fear coiling in his gut. "What are you looking for?" For the first time, a flicker of something, amusement, respect, crossed her face. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "A question better left unasked, soldier. But since you've asked—" She paused, her lips curling into a faint, humorless smile. "We're searching for the truth. And trust me, you don't want to know it." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air as the soldiers dragged Ellis from the room, the sound of crackling flames rising behind him. The chair experiment. Dr. Evelyn Morse tightened her grip on the black binder as she entered the sleek, glass-walled laboratory. Her sharp heels echoed against the polished floor, punctuating the low hum of machines. The centerpiece of the room stood stark and unyielding, a steel-framed chair surrounded by an array of wires and sensors, its design clinical and foreboding. Her creation, her burden. "You're late," a voice called from the far corner. Evelyn turned to see Dr. Victor Hall. His tie loosened and his sleeves rolled to the elbows, his piercing gaze as critical as ever. Victor had been a prodigy in neural interface technology, and his recruitment to the project 6 months ago had shifted its trajectory, for better or worse. "Good to see you two," Evelyn replied, setting the binder on the desk. "Have they arrived?" "They're in the prep room. We should have started 30 minutes ago." Evelyn ignored his tone. Punctuality had never been her strong suit, but if anyone could execute this experiment, it was her. Still, the stakes felt heavier today. The chair was no longer a theoretical model. It was real, operational, and they were minutes away from testing it on live participants. Victor slid a tablet across the desk, its screen glowing with 2 profiles. Mia Harper, 26, a journalist with a knack for skepticism, and Isaac Renshaw, 28, an artist with a history of emotional volatility. 2 strangers selected for their polarized outlooks, yet similar cognitive elasticity scores. "They're not ideal," Victor muttered, "but we're out of time. The board wants results." Evelyn skimmed their files, frowning. Mia's grounded, pragmatic. Isaac, though, his psych profile raises flags. That's why he's perfect. "We're testing emotional resonance, not compliance." Victor smirked. "Or did you forget what this is about?" Evelyn's chest tightened. She hadn't forgotten. The chair's purpose was audacious: to create an unmediated, shared consciousness between 2 individuals. No words, no gestures, just raw, unfiltered thought. If successful, it could revolutionize human connection, breaking down barriers of language, bias, and misunderstanding. But the risks loomed just as large. A failed connection could shatter a mind, leaving permanent scars. She straightened her spine. "Let's bring them in." Victor nodded and gestured toward the door. Moments later, Mia and Isaac entered, their contrasting energy immediately apparent. Mia was poised, her dark hair swept back into a bun, her sharp eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. She wore a neutral expression, though her crossed arms betrayed tension. Isaac, on the other hand, carried an almost frenetic energy. His fingers tapped rhythmically against his thigh, and his gaze darted between the equipment and the researchers. His messy blonde hair and paint-streaked jeans made him look out of place in the sterile lab. "This is the experiment?" Mia asked, her voice clipped. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "You'll both sit in the chair. Once connected, your thoughts, emotions, and memories will flow freely between you. The goal is to achieve a state of mutual understanding, a deeper connection than is possible through any other means." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "And if we don't connect?" Victor interjected, his tone matter-of-fact. "Then the system will shut down, and we'll recalibrate for future trials." "What he means," Evelyn added, "is that the system is designed to protect you. But we need your trust." Isaac hesitated, then glanced at Mia. "You cool with this?" "I'm here, aren't I?" she replied, her voice measured. But her gaze flicked to Evelyn. "What aren't you telling us?" Evelyn hesitated, then decided on honesty. "The process can be intense. Emotional walls will come down. You'll experience each other's rawest truths, joy, pain, anger. It might be overwhelming, but it's temporary." "Temporary," Mia echoed, her skepticism palpable. "Think of it as stepping into someone else's soul. Victor said, smirking. Scared? Isaac gave a dry laugh. I paint for a living. Emotions are my job. Evelyn led them to the chair, her stomach nodding as they strapped in. Mia's grip on the armrest was white-knuckled, while Isaac's foot tapped a frantic rhythm. Evelyn adjusted the sensors on their temples, her fingers trembling slightly. Ready? She asked. Neither answered, but their silence spoke volumes. Evelyn stepped back, exchanging a glance with Victor, who initiated the sequence. The room dimmed as the chair powered up, its hum intensifying. Monitors flickered with streams of data as the system calibrated their neural frequencies. Evelyn's heart pounded. Then the first jolt. Isaac flinched, his head snapping back as his breathing quickened. Mia gasped, her eyes wide with sudden tears. What's happening? Mia choked, her voice raw. You're feeling him, Evelyn said softly. His memories, his pain. Isaac let out a strangled laugh. You weren't kidding? His voice was thick with emotion. She's so lonely. Mia's jaw tightened. And he's angry. All the time. Their words spilled into the air, raw and unfiltered. The monitors spiked as their connection deepened. For a brief moment, the room felt charged with something primal, something neither Evelyn nor Victor had anticipated. And then the chair stuttered. Isaac screamed, his back arching as the sensors overloaded. Mia's breath came in ragged gasps, her fingers clawing at the armrests. Shut it down, Evelyn shouted. Victor hesitated, his finger hovering over the switch. But look at the data. Now! With a reluctant flick, the chair powered down. The hum faded, leaving only the sound of labored breathing. Isaac slumped forward, his face pale, while Mia sat frozen, her eyes staring at something distant. What the hell was that? Mia whispered. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had no answer. Victor, however, leaned in, his expression alight with intrigue. That was just the beginning. Resolution and mutual understanding. The lanterns in the marketplace flickered, their light bending under the whim of a steady evening breeze. Nida stood at the edge of the crowd, her cloak heavy with the day's dust. Across the cobblestone square, a figure emerged from the haze of vendors and performers. Callan, her estranged brother. The sight of him brought a tightness to her chest, equal parts longing and apprehension. She had crossed rivers, deserts, and sleepless nights to find him, but the man walking toward her bore little resemblance to the boy she remembered. Callan stopped a few paces away, his face partially obscured by the hood of his own cloak. His eyes, though shadowed, carried a wary recognition. You're late, he said, his voice calm but edged with something harder. Nida frowned. You vanished for 8 years, and I'm late? His lips quirked into a brief, humorless smile. Fair point. Still, I thought you'd never come. I shouldn't have had to, she snapped. Her fingers curled tightly around the strap of her satchel, her words sharper than she intended. You left, Callan. You left us. He sighed, lowering his hood. His hair was longer now, streaked with silver where there once was dark brown, though he couldn't have been older than 35. I had my reasons. Convenient, she shot back, her anger slipping past her defenses. While you were off finding your reasons, the farm fell apart. Mother worked herself to the bone. And father, her voice broke, but she steadied it. Father died asking for you. Callan flinched as though struck. For a moment, he said nothing, his gaze falling to the cobblestones between them. When he finally looked up, his expression was lined with guilt. I know I failed you. Both of you. But I couldn't stay, Nida. You wouldn't understand. Then make me understand, she demanded, stepping closer. Tell me why you left us to drown while you disappeared into the shadows. Callan hesitated, his eyes darting to the crowd as if seeking an escape route. But the determination in Nida's stance pinned him in place. He drew a breath and gestured for her to follow him. Reluctantly, she did, trailing him down a narrow alley where the noise of the market softened into distant hums. Once they were alone, Callan leaned against the wall, shoulders sagging under a weight that seemed too heavy for one man. Do you remember that night in the barn years ago? The storm? Nida blinked, caught off guard by the question. Of course. The lightning struck the field, and we thought the whole place would go up in flames. You saved the horses. I did more than that, he said, his voice low. That lightning wasn't natural. It came for me. What are you talking about? She asked, confused. Callan raised his hand, palm up. A faint, electric glow flickered to life, dancing like miniature lightning across his fingers. Nida stepped back instinctively, her heart pounding. Well, what is that? This is why I left, he said, extinguishing the light. After that storm, people came looking for me. People who could do what I can. They called it a gift, but I knew it was a curse. I couldn't stay, Nida. If they found me, they would have burned the farm, taken me by force, or worse, come after you. Nida stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to accuse him of inventing excuses, but the memory of that storm, the way the air had crackled, the way the fire had seemed to obey him, clawed its way back into her consciousness. You could have told us, she whispered. We could have helped you. And risk your lives? He countered. I couldn't do that. So I ran. I thought I was protecting you. Clearly, I failed at that too. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Nida's anger hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, reshaped into something closer to understanding. She studied him, this man who had become a stranger, and yet was still her brother. Why now? She asked finally. Why let me find you now? Callan hesitated. Because the people who are hunting me, they've shifted their focus. They're after anyone with a connection to me. And that includes you. Her breath hitched. You mean? Yes, he said grimly. You're in danger because of me. Nida looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She should have felt fear, but instead a different emotion stirred, resolve. For all his mistakes, Callan had returned, and despite everything, she would not abandon him now. Then we'll face them together, she said, her voice steady. Callan's eyes widened, but a faint smile broke through his weariness. You're as stubborn as ever. And you're still an idiot, she replied, managing a small smile of her own. But you're my idiot. Let's figure this out. As they stood in the dim alley, the faint hum of the marketplace behind them, the distance between them began to close. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start.